Welcome to Muslims Doing Things, a podcast about extraordinary people and their career journeys. And on that note, Ramy Youssef, hi.
So good to see you on the screen.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. And Ramy, what do you do? Let's start out with who you are. What do you do?
What do- a bunch of stuff. Like we we're talking like at a really funny day because it's like the show we just dropped the third season of the show that we make on Hulu, and I've been doing that for a while. I actually just kind of in my head was realizing I first started putting together the characters and the ideas and stuff for it in a really concrete way, probably December 2016. And so we're in October now, and I was like, oh wow, we're kind of getting up on 6 years of this being the main thing on my mind. So I've been doing a lot of that, but in that process, a lot of writing and producing and directing and acting and all of that, and I do stand up, and you know, I'm in it.
And you're a Golden Globe winner. The show has 3 Emmy nominations. If you're not going to say it, I just am. And you might be like the one of the first Muslims. You're definitely one of the first Muslim nominees in the Golden Globes. Is that for real, or did I make that up?
I don't know
I
actually.
don't know.
I don't know because everyone always is like runs to the first thing, but I don't actually know. I mean, in that category, even I don't know, just because I think even like, well, Mahershala has won Globes, Aziz Ansari has won Globes, and so there's definitely people who've been in the conversation. I think part of what you know the light that I think part of the light that our show is looked at under is that we're kind of we really went in on looking at the social lives and the spiritual lives in a very direct way of this Arab Muslim family in New Jersey. And I think being really direct, where it wasn't incidental or it wasn't just kind of a fact that was a side note, but actually being something that we were really putting our lens on is part of what I think really has always stuck with people about the show.
So I'm going to flip the script. I was planning to do the how you got to Ramy part first and about the show second, but you hit a note that I really want to talk about, which
Let's
I'm
do it.
excited to talk about. So
Yeah.
I'm obviously a Muslim American, and I lived through 9/11. You lived through 9/11. We spent like the early 2000s being like, we're not terrorists. We're not terrorists, right? And by the mid 2010s, we kind of shifted the narrative to like, not only are we not terrorists, we're really good people. Like
Mm,
Muslims are extraordinary, and we like make sure Muslim millennial to always be the best version of you. Don't embarrass yourself because you're embarrassing us as a
yeah.
community, right?
Yeah.
And then we shifted like a few more years, and it was like not only are we really good people, but Muslims can sell things incredibly. And the rise of the Muslim like influencer happened, right? Like Muslim women can literally sell a garbage bag and
Yeah.
convince you to put it on your head or around your body. And like we have been really effective, and large brands have seen this and they've capitalized on it. And I would say like this is mid 2010s, and it's like a Muslim woman I've like ridden all these waves and like capitalized on them, or they've been at the cost of me respectively, right? And now for real. And now we're in the 2020s. And like this is the Ramy era. I just made that up. We can call it the Muslims Doing Things era. We can call it the Ramy era. But like
Oh my
what's
God.
different here is now we're openly on our journey in the search of self, but also openly claiming our journey outside the search of self. Like, yeah, I'm Muslim, but like, it's more of your thing than it is my thing in terms of your public image. I just
Mm,
happen to wear hijab, so people want to include me in DE&I conversations. And when I say I work in technology, they assume that I'm a DE&I person. I'm like, no, dude, I founded the company. Like, we raised 72 million bucks. Like, I know about diversity because I'm diverse, but don't put me in charge of your DE&I because it'll fail, right? So like now we're in this era where there's this like evolution and a focus on the breadth of what the Muslim is and what this identity might cover. And I really want to hear your thoughts on whether the show was meant to reflect that, how you tackled that journey, how you avoided the fear of like even the scrutiny, because we also want everything to represent everybody. And as
yeah.
a personal fan of Ramy, it does not represent everybody. It represents you, which is like maybe you, which is like what it should do, right? So lay it on me.
um, you know, we're I think that we're like in general in a time, I think even if you think about the time that we grew up, right, and the way that you laid it out, uh, another side to it that I think we all experienced growing up at that time is just, I think a lot about having an online profile from a really young age, of being 9 or 10 or whatever, and we were making Zangas and MySpaces and AIM profiles and all of this stuff, and kind of um, focusing on presenting ourselves to the world
Mm,
as who we were,
mhm,
at a really young age. And I think it has created this. It's part of a large wave of how individualized society is, and how we are really in a state of living for the self. Especially, I would say, growing up in America, the way community functions is a lot different than the way I would feel community function when I would go visit my family in Egypt, or that I understood community to function even through the lens of my parents. The way that it was kind of around us is a lot different. And so I think now we're really at the peak of a hyper individualized society. And I do think that people are confused by it. And I think that people are looking for something else. And I think the conversation around, like, we've been working on this show for 6 years, the conversation around spirituality, I have felt the more that we make the show has become more relevant to various audiences. And that's not just Muslim Americans. I think it is people who I hear from all walks of life, all different faiths, all different mindsets, who see what we do in the show. Because essentially, what we're doing in the show is we're talking about a character, and we're talking about a family, and we're looking at higher self and lower self. And we're also looking at the seen and the unseen. And we're watching people try to navigate that, and all the failures and all the roadblocks and all the ego that comes in the way of that. And so I think, in terms of ego getting in the way of aspirations and of love and of commitments and of actualization, um, the show is about that spiritual battle. Then there's the Muslim, elements that go on top of it. But it's really, to me, it's about this pretty universal spiritual battle that I think everyone is trying to find their own shape and trying to find their own way into. We're at peak of trying to understand what that means right now. And so I think that's where the work of this show is a part of that larger wave and is part of that story. And so I think that for that reason, it resonates with a lot of people who aren't Muslim. And then I think it resonates with the people who are Muslim, who are open about looking at that conversation, from not so much of a cultural lens, but from a personal one. And so I feel, yeah, I feel like that's the zeitgeist that our show does hit. It's kind of a subtle zeitgeist, but it's really thriving, and I feel it in the way that people interact with it when they do get a chance to see it.
I have to say that when I watched this season and saw very little of you, which I'm assuming was a very intentional move, very little relative to the other seasons.
Sure.
What really happened was these other characters that are all like Big Tent Muslim, right, or Big Tent Brown, Big Tent whatever, had an opportunity to develop, and you saw a lot of their issues, higher lower self issues, and they often didn't overlap,
Yeah.
right? They might have overlapped with the audience, but often not each other. And those subtle things are what builds this level of like humanization. Like even the 2010s were perfect era, that's not humanizing,
Yeah.
right? Whereas like looking at Dina and laughing because we've all had like funny suitors come through our parents, right? And, like things like that happen, and just kind of laugh at the reality, but also like the total, just the hilarity of the reality that goes into many of the scenes that were created was really something. And I think that when I looked at it, I was like, okay, there are all these characters under this Big Ten identity that's very easy to make a small focused really uninteresting identity, and you see these folks fight these fights, and these fights don't overlap with them, but they overlap with like me, viewer, person
Yeah.
of whatever identity, faith, color, you name it. So like there's a brilliance in that. And we started the show off before I was recording telling you I thought you were a genius. And that has to do with some of the reason why, in case you were wondering, that has to do with some of the reason why.
I mean, it's there's the whole thing is such a collaboration, which is what I was telling you. I mean, I think like for me, I love guiding it and directing it, and I'm pushing it to this conversation that's really important. But in terms of whether I need to be, the name of the show is a total misnomer at this point, and my participation on camera physically is is something I enjoy, and I think it's something that threads the show and holds the show. But also, there's all these really potent experiences, and like you said, I really like how you said that they don't intersect with each other, but they intersect with the audience, and I think that is like such a family, where a family can sit at the same table and everyone's got all this stuff going on and they don't all know about it. You can even live in the same house. I think a lot about how little I know about people that I interact with every day, even people I love, even people in my family, even people who are very close friends. I maybe only know 50% of how they actually are viewing every single moment. And I think what is fun to do in television or film, it's this medium where, again, we're living in the seen and the unseen, and it's almost like a movie or a TV show could be a glitch of capturing some of that unseen and making it seen and curating it and sharing it and spreading, what that experience is. So we get these little windows into these different family members, and they are by definition incomplete. But the emotion that they touch on, I think, you know, I hope is a contribution.
It's funny you mentioned that about knowing your family and not knowing your family. Before this show, I'm like a proper WhatsApp auntie. I was like audio messaging friends, like, so what'd you think about the season? And like, my
Yeah.
smartest friends, they thought I was checking in. I was really trying to do some research before I chat with you and kind of
Sure.
compare ideas. And so I'm efficient. I'm known for my efficiency, Ramy. You may or may not know this.
Yes.
Um, that said, I I was chatting with a friend and he was like, I love the show. And I tell you this as somebody I grew up with, but I would never tell my eldest brother or my mom. Right. And I was like, I thought about that and I was like, wait, I too am selectively talking about Ramy. I'm
Yeah.
not hiding what I think about Ramy, but there are some folks who like it's not their thing, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe they're not they're not like ready in terms of kind of the
Yeah.
where the conversation is, or it's not appealing to them or whatever it is. So even in terms of family and knowing family, something as simple as really a pop culture show. Like, let's be clear, your show is like my podcast is not called Things Muslims Do. It's called Muslims Doing Things, right? And Ramy's like similar. It's Muslims doing things, not things Muslims do. And people kind of always want to flip any internal representation to external representation to things Muslims do to fix this like PR crisis that not only are we not accountable for, but we've had to effectively fight our whole lives. And people who can look outside of the okay, we're constantly working on this PR crisis and see it as like, no, this is an accurate reflection of things that are happening in our communities, right?
Yeah.
I think are able to maybe the show resonates with them more, they have a bit more interest in it. But for sure, like there's certain people who I was much more keen to reach out to and be like, what do you think? Let's talk about this. And others where I was like, I'm just going to park this for another day that never comes.
Yeah. No, I think that's really that's fair and that's real. And I think that people are looking for different things depending on where they are. Our show is like it tends to be a real barometer for um, you know where someone is at, and what I mean by that is there are people who watch the show and they say, "Oh my God, there's so many sex scenes. Like, what is going on here?" Because they're not comfortable seeing us engage in that. And the show has no nudity, but it's still kind of like even seeing us go to that length. That same person probably watches Game of Thrones, which is much more sexual and much more violent, which I think is even it's interesting in our communities, the desensitization around violent characters versus sexual ones, when most people will have a sexual experience. Most people will not have an experience with a gun, yet we're more open to seeing the gun. And there's something odd about that in kind of the way that we've been conditioned. But someone can watch this show and say, oh my God, there's so much sex, what's going on? Because that's what they're uncomfortable with. But then there are other people who could watch and say, man, like all these guys are doing is praying, because they're not comfortable with that level of spirituality, being shown. And so it tends to have a little bit of a mirror like effect in terms of, what are you looking for and where are you at? And so that's that feeling to me of, yeah, I'm going to text this one friend, but I'm not going to text this other friend about it. But I think the fact that there's even like, I like that, because I've always felt like if people are fighting about the show, they're actually fighting about the underlying issues that the show is talking about. But the show gives them a container to discuss those things in a way that they might not have if it was just about their personal lives. So in that sense, I hope that it's an offering, because it's kind of like, okay, so you don't want to name these things in your friend group, you don't want to name them in your family. All right, you could just complain about the show, or just say that you think the show is terrible or sucks, or like the show is like this devilish thing or whatever. If that's what helps you get to the conversation, then that's great. Then it's kind of like, for me, that's, oh my gosh, how, like, that's such a cool thing to be able to offer.
It's funny because as I think about the lens of the rebukers, we'll call them, like it's really like, oh, we cannot normalize these things, when the reality is just like they're normal and they're happening, right? The reality is people are going through these experiences. People are choosing these experiences. These are things Muslims do, or
Yeah.
non-Muslims, or whomever they may be. But like we have to kind of be, um, you're presenting a forum by which folks can discuss. I have questions around like how you made decisions. Like if I were in your shoes, those would be really hard decisions to make, right? Because I'm stuck in the, like, I'm perfect, y'all. I'm perfect because I'm Muslim and I'm not a terrorist. I'm really perfect. I'm really smart. I'm cool. Like Ramy, I don't know if you know this, but like we did the Mipsters video in 2013, like a long time ago,
Yeah.
where I was on a skateboard and heels and yada yada yada, and
Yes.
people lost their minds. I've been skateboarding since I was a dorky like preteen.
Yeah.
And all I had to do was like look cool and be Muslim, and the bar was so low. Like, yes, it was beautifully done. I'm not gonna lie, but if
Yeah.
you put that on the internet now, nobody would care. But the
Yeah.
bar has been so low, so like kind of getting above the bar has been such an easy task my whole life. But it's also been a goal because I'm in this like PR battle against this like intangible, huge nothingness, and I have this aspiration to just be perfect all the time. That will always be kind of stuck in my head to represent this community. And I'm making assumptions for you, but I'm assuming that you feel the burden of representation. How did you make those choices?
I see the burden of representation. I try not to feel it too much, just because, um, as you know, then it would just be really hard to make anything. And so I think, like, I have a lot of conversations with fellow Muslim people who are making things or want to make things, and you know, I kind of just am constantly trying to tell them, you don't have you actually, like, it's so optional to read Twitter. It's a straight up option. Like, you don't have to. And like, everyone on there has the right to say what they want to say. And I think great things can come of that, maybe. But that doesn't have to be your medium. You have a different medium. And we can't create from scarcity, and we can't create from fear, and we can't create from what will somebody else say, because that's just kind of the nature of making anything. It's like, everything is up for debate, and I think all of it is good. I actually think all of the feedback around it, all of the opinions, again, they hopefully bring up healthy conversation, because at the end of the day, it's just a TV show comedy. And so it's like, how could you be more critical of it than like of a governing system, or of, the a lot of local, whether it be within families, or whether it be within, you know schools, or whether it be within mosques, or whether it be, there's a lot of power dynamics that are really tough. And I think, it's certainly not going to be like a TV show that's actually the issue. That's how I view it. And I think, to
Right.
the point that you were saying too, like, yeah, there's this discussion around normalizing or promoting even. And I think, it would be sometimes someone will say to me, why does it seem like people aren't having fun, as much fun on your show? And I'm like, well, because there is this like overriding feeling of guilt that is like an interesting one to capture, especially with the things that we're talking about. And so I think guilt is funny, and I think it's real, and I think a lot of the situations we put our characters in are really funny. But in terms of them like having fun or enjoying everything that they're doing, that would almost to me seem like a promotion. But it's not really, like, because it's at, when they are operating from their ego, it is to their pain, and I think we go out of our way to show that. And so that's where I draw the line. I don't think that we're ever kind of trying to make something that says, hey, you should change the rules of what you believe, or
Mm,
or even criticizing what the tenets are of anyone's belief system. It's more, look at this gap between what someone believes and what they actually do, and why is that
mm,
gap there? And I think
mm.
that's what's interesting. I'm not, it's not about promoting anything other than looking at that gap and trying to figure out how to eliminate it or why it exists.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really real and awesome point of view, because the gap is there. I have my gaps. You have your gaps. Like your namesake, we've clarified he's only your namesake. Ramy has his gaps. I was really hoping I can use the word eponymous. Side note, I've learned it for the SATs and have never used it. And
Oh,
you
we could,
took that
yeah.
opportunity from me.
That should be the name of this podcast, eponymous.
So now, I mean, I decided to warm you up with the really easy questions. Um, let's go backwards. What's the roadmap to Ramy? Did you know this is what you wanted to do, and what did it take to get there?
I well, there's so many steps. I mean, I think one of them was I was always making things. I was always videotaping, video editing, writing little things. That, first thing I ever saved up aid money for was this little camcorder with a black and white viewfinder. That was just what I liked. And my parents were really supportive of it, but their support kind of laid in kind of this foundation of, this is a hobby. And
Hmm.
that wasn't from anything bad, other than I don't think any of us understood what it could look like as not a hobby. You know, we're in New Jersey. In, we don't live in Beverly Hills or something. We don't have a bunch of people that are even reference points. The idea of being on television is not something that feels real in any sense. So I understood it as a hobby as well. I understood it as a hobby almost forever, until it really kind of smacked me in the face that this was what I was going to be doing. But I was just shooting music videos for local bands. I was making commercials for local businesses, and I we had a school kind of morning announcement thing, all that stuff, and I was just, and a lot of that stuff too I was making with my buddy Steve Way, who's on my show, who plays my buddy Steve, and our buddy Jonathan, and we just had this really great troupe, and we just had fun. It was just fun. And then I think at some point that would work out. I found myself getting on stage in New York once I could drive, and then that turned into a manager saying, "Oh, hey, you should do an audition," and then that got me to a point where I ended up booking a TV show that moved me to LA. And I remember at that point really thinking, if this could happen for me, which I couldn't have even fathomed, 2, 3 years prior, if this could happen for me, I would love to be in a situation where I could make something, because I'd been writing all these little things for so many years, and I wanted to make something that felt honest to the type of struggle that I felt, which was I didn't want to I didn't want to keep watching things where someone was either way, way religious and judgmental, or totally kind of abandoning what their faith and their culture is because they kind of want to. Uh, the subtext was always, hey, I know my name is Brown, but I could be white too. That was always the subtext of so much media. And that was part of what you're talking about too, in the I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Don't worry, don't be afraid. I'm just like you. I actually don't have values. Don't worry about it. There was a lot of that. And uh yeah, everything felt soft, that felt soft. Being really aggressive felt soft. uh I wanted something that felt like a representation of the honest challenge. And so I was interested too in just different perspectives. We have this episode in the first season where we see the child version of my character experience 9/11, and I had written that idea roughly as a movie. And so I had thought, from years before we even got into the show conversation, I thought, oh, this would be an amazing movie. I'd love this has never been covered, and then we got the show, and it felt instantly, it was a no-brainer to do that. I don't really believe in hoarding or saving ideas. It's just, hey, let's go, let's throw it all, and then I will push myself to think of something better, or more. It's not even about better, but just more actualized and more clear. And so yeah, it all kind of grew organically, but there was that desire to get it going, and then it materialized in kind of unimaginable ways too.
And so you're in Jersey, you're filming things, and you said a manager or an agent or both.
I got a manager first, but then an agent. And I was 18 or 19, I think. Yeah.
So you get an agent and get a show. What was the show?
It was a sitcom, a kids. It was kind of a kid adult ish sitcom for Nick at Night, and it was a really great time of my life. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was working at the Apple Store, and then a month later, I was moving to Los Angeles.
And so you move to LA, you have a manager, you have an agent, you have a show. And at that point, were you strategizing? Like, do you effectively just try to do really good on the show, or are you strategizing your next piece? How do you, as somebody who maybe doesn't have a roadmap, as it's more, creative careers tend to be like that, what were the steps you put in place? You hire a publicist and you're like, put my name everywhere. Like, what does it look like then?
No, yeah, no publicist or anything. I think more I was just kind of trying to soak in how things were done. I was shooting at Paramount Pictures, the lot. We were shooting this show, and I had a small part in the show. I mean, it wasn't nothing, but it wasn't anything that would be career defining. It felt, even from the beginning, that this role would just allow me to be there. I immediately felt, okay, this buys me some time to not finish college and to try and figure something out while I'm in Los Angeles. And so I'm out there, and I'm doing stand up a lot. I start getting into stand up. I had mainly just done sketch comedy before I moved to LA, but I start getting into stand up. And then at Paramount, I'm asking the writers who are writing this show I'm on, hey, do you think I could learn about how you do what you do? Can I shadow your writer's room? I would kind of follow around the directors and go visit the editors. And I kind of just was wanting to see how everyone did what they did. That was really exciting for me, to just see how it was made on a professional level, and to understand even that the gap between what I was doing with my friends in New Jersey and what was happening at this movie studio wasn't as big as I thought it would be. It was just making stuff. It
Mm.
really felt, oh, they have more money and they're really talented. And I also, yeah, I get it. I've seen that editing software,
Mhm.
or yeah, this is the same way something is written, but they're doing it obviously um, with a lot more experience. But there's something. It was a time about demystifying a lot of that stuff. But yeah, doing a lot of stand up and um, also doing my job, that I was brought out there to do, and then starting to slowly plant the seeds. But everything took time. It wasn't quick.
What did planting the seeds look like, and were you aware you were planting the seeds?
It's a good question. I mean, I think it was just, you I think there's a lot of parts of life, or sometimes even parts of a day, where you don't know what to do that day, or you don't know what to do in a certain chapter of where you are. And so immediately you think, okay, what's the next immediate thing I should do? And I think for me, a lot of that was, hey, I have an idea today. This feels like a good thing to work on today. I don't know how it's going to fit in the bigger picture, but I would sit and I would write. Or, okay, I want to go do stand up this week. I'm going to try and do it every night this week. That feels like a good thing to do this week. So there would be these zoomed out, hired desires and goals, but I didn't really know how to get to them, but I knew that there were these little things where I could see things grow. I could see myself go from having 5 minutes of stand up to 15 minutes of stand up to 30 to an hour. I could see all of that stuff go in that direction. And so it was just the principle of scaling felt really clear. And so I think I'd spent and continue to spend. I mean, I think now maybe I've been able to see things a bit more zoomed out, but maybe only in the last few years. I think I've lived most of my life really with the faith that, okay, it'll scale. I just need to do what's in front of me. And that is an act of faith. I think an artistic life, I think even your experience and your story, in the way that that can be structureless, like you said, because it is within a creative field. These fields require a lot of faith, and in a way, in the unseen, like we were talking about, because a script is unseen. It's just, even if it's written, it's not seen. We haven't seen it, and I think, so many of these things, you have to have the faith that it'll come together in a way that is hopefully, beneficial for everybody involved.
And so you're realizing you didn't give yourself enough credit. You pretty much know that you can do this. You're honing in your skills. The skills are being able to, I'm sure, write, pitch, learn how to be on stage for long periods of time, and kind of refine that story through stand up, because stand up is its own type of genius, right? A genius in like communication methodology, a genius in kind of
Right.
how you speak and the pace in which you speak. You just have to be very smart to be good at stand up. And you start writing a pilot at that point? Is that how that works? You're like, I'm going to write a script.
No, it wasn't quite like that. I was opening for a good friend of mine, Gerard Carmichael, who had gotten a show on the air at the time. I think it was on NBC, and I was also really good friends with my buddy Ari Kacher, who had written on that, and they were always kind of bugging me, like, "Oh, you should do a show," and I felt like, okay, but I'm not quite ready yet. I want to figure out more of what's going on in my stand up. And then eventually I felt really clear about what I wanted to do with my stand up, and therefore what I wanted to do with the show. And that's kind of this period where started putting down characters, that December 2016, started to kind of say, okay, here's some characters, here's what's going on. And then we had this, it was an accident, actually. I had this tape from the Laugh Factory. There was a comic that didn't show up that was supposed to go up after me. And so I had to run a really long set. And I think it was my first time running 45, 50 minutes. So I had this long tape of my stand up that was a glitch that it even existed. And then we we had these characters, things we worked on, uh, that group, and then we also and our buddy Ryan Welch, and then we also um, had met with A24, who were really interested in it, the production company, and so we had this outline really that was based on my stand up, all these character ideas that we crafted, mixed with my stand up tape, and then we went out to networks. And there was interest, we had multiple networks who were interested in doing it. And then it felt right to do it with Hulu because they felt really excited about it and it felt like they needed it. And that was really cool.
And as somebody who's watched all 3 seasons and seen the type of content you put out there, I think that they meant it because there's certainly things on TV that I never imagined I would see on the big screen. So glad you did that.
Yes.
Hashtag, wow, I don't even know, season 3, episode 2. Everybody watch it. So, nevertheless, you start shopping the show around. There's a ton of interest. You're like, I'm gonna have a show, and does somebody then buy it? And you like start writing a script and putting characters together and shooting them. Like, how does
Yeah.
how do you go from here to there?
Yeah, so that was really what it was. It was those characters with the stand-up tape. Hulu bought it. So we wrote the pilot, we shot the pilot, and then they decided they wanted to make the show. And then we had a writer's room for the first season where we wrote 9 episodes because we had already shot one. So we wrote 9 more to do a 10 episode season. And yeah, then we shot that. And so that whole process just happened over a couple of years.
Hmm. And you put it out there, and you say Bismillah, and like, what was that like? Like, season 1, I watched it. I watched season 2. You grabbed Mahershala. By season 3, you had Bella. Like, I kind of saw the growth in terms of, I'm sure, budget and people loving it and so on and so forth. But like, what was the actual Ramy journey?
It's a great question. I mean, I think that I was, I think my understandings of where the show sits, in terms of just its value, community discourse, all of that are learned lessons in a lot of ways. I mean, I think I knew making it that it wouldn't be for everybody, and you saw in the first season, we definitely take risks that um, indicate that we know we're taking risks, and for sure. And I felt like I understood what some of the feedback might be, but I also felt, that yeah, that it would be okay, even even when it's not. And I think there was definitely at first like a little element of shock of feelings from, again, like various audience members in the various communities that kind of touch upon the show. Um and so just as a personal journey, I think I had to really be okay with the reality that, yeah, that it would be that there'd be a little bit of a split, although way more people like it than they don't. But I think there's just that, to your earlier question, just that thing of like, how do you push past that stuff? I think you just go through it and then you realize, um, that it's okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
and especially if you're not doing anything hateful, which we've never done. We've never done anything hateful. It's all kind of self-examining work, and so that and it's about that more than anything. And so yeah, but I think the journey from season 1 to season 2 to season 3, it's been cool to get to grow the work. Like, I think I learned a lot from season 1 and season 2, which we basically did back to back. And we tried different things in both seasons, playing with storylines, with tone, with characters, with all of that. And then I think that allowed us to make the third season, which I think is my favorite one by far. And it also allowed us to, at the same time, we also made Mo's show on Netflix, which, I worked a lot on. And that also, gives a totally different slice. And I think even the ability to, that was a show that I felt like, as we're making it, okay, we're focusing on, we're making certain political issues personal through Mo, who is so uniquely able to do that. And I think, in a way, I knew it would be a bit more of comfort food for our communities, because we are just more
Yeah.
comfortable discussing the political in that way.
Right.
And I was excited to be part of that, because I want people to have what they want, in a way. Like, I'm an entertainer at the end of the day. I want the laugh.
Hmm.
I want the
Hmm.
I want the connection, because connecting is really fun. Uh, and so it was really fun making that show and writing on that show, because um, I felt, oh, this will be a great, and I pitched that show with Mo, only a couple months after the first season. So we've really been working on it, like getting it right, for a while. And so that was cool. It was like a learning lesson, in a way, but also, I think, part of a larger effort that we understood even from the beginning. I kind of felt, even as we were making the first season and before, in the same way that when I moved to LA and I got this acting role, and I thought, okay, I want to do a couple of other things. It was even the same thing with the first season of this show, in knowing that we've got such amazing talent in our communities. And it's my job with this show to not try to do everything,
Hmm.
because as long as I can zone in on a really specific thing, it'll be for who it's for, it'll be for who it's not. But by not trying to be everything, it at least has a shot at being good. And then if
Right.
it's good, that's how we can make more things. And that's where it's like, totally, alhamdulillah, like, we've been able to start what I think is just the beginning of that, you know. And so that's exciting.
I'm laughing at just the beginning because yesterday I was chatting with Ibtihaj, who's a friend of both of ours, and I was like, "Oh, I'm talking to Ramy tomorrow," and we were chatting about you, and I was like, "Ibtihaj, I was at an Impact dinner with Hadi within the last 5 years, where Ramy was like the main event of the Impact dinner." And a few years later, like he has a Golden Globe, a bunch of Emmy nods, two shows on Hulu. Like this fool is just getting started. And I had this moment of like reflection and like excitement personally. But I have to say your ears must have been ringing because I think that you're right that it's just the beginning, but the beginning has like come with such a hard swing that I think that you've set a cadence and like I would say like a bar that I know that you'll be able to meet, but it's high, right? Like
Well, and
it's
by the
high.
way, it's not. This isn't. I don't view it as just the beginning for me. I view it as a beginning for us, and in the sense of, like, you know, again, even making, the Hulu show. It's like, it's an improper title, because I view it as, this is, it's a troupe of people who are all incredibly talented. And I think I knew that from the beginning. It's like, you've got Mo, Dave Merhej, Hiam Abbas, May Kalamawi, Laith Nackley, and look at what everyone's doing. Mo's Netflix show is doing great. May and Laith are fucking Marvel. You know what I mean? It's crazy. You know what I mean? It's like, and everyone is really, it opens up a space. And I think, something we're really working on. We actually have multiple things that are attempting swinging at this too, is just like, great, like, what is a show centering around a woman's experiences? What is a
Mm,
show that looks at, other parts of our communities? And I think, even when you look at, I think there's a really funny case study of just Ramy on Hulu, Mo on Netflix. From an eagle's eye view, you could almost think that like, you're like, how are those two different things? And then you watch them and you're like, these are completely different things. And so for the industry to see that, I think that opens up a whole window of, oh, there's so much to tap into here, in a meaningful way. And so when I say it's just the beginning, I truly don't mean it about just me. I mean it about this moment. And I think you kind of started talking about those moments at the beginning of this. And I think you were really accurate, because this is something that can have nuance. And I think, as an audience, and as communities, we deserve to be in an era of nuance, as opposed to an era of scarcity. And I feel like, when my show first came out, it came out almost with the framing of like, here's something to end the scarcity, which I think is
Mm,
damaging in a way because that's almost framing it as it's the answer or the
right.
thing to quench the thirst, and it's not at all. It never was designed to be that. And I think for anyone who said, "How could you do that?" It's kind of like, well, of course, if I thought this was the thing to be everything, I would never do that. So of course, yes, how would I do that if I thought this show was meant to
Mm.
represent everything? But no, this show is about what I would hope and that I can just be a part of, and I don't even think that I'm responsible for it. It's just where gravity is pulling us. But hoping that it's part of the that it could be earmarked as part of the beginning of an era of nuance as opposed to one of scarcity. And so
No,
that's
without
really
question.
exciting for all of us.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because people who were upset because it didn't represent them, and you're like, but I don't want this to represent you. So there's like this scarcity that's led to this like hunger of like mass representation. And remember, by default, mass representation is brilliant. We're brilliant. We're great, right? And you're like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, like this is my story, but people still took it very personally.
Yeah.
Not my story, it's Ramy's story. Guys, remember, it's not eponymous. It's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ramy's
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
but but like in terms of recognition and I have to ask because we're getting closer to the end of our time. What is it like winning a Golden Globe?
Um, I mean, look, I think for us, it was just the biggest advertisement that the show could have gotten. It literally felt like a billboard on, in the best place possible, and it feels awesome to be recognized. It felt really cool um, to be in that position, but again, it felt like it was not just for me. It felt like it was for the show. It's easy for it to be for me because again, I'm the face of the thing, and so fine. But it's an acting award that's really it's representative of everything that we're talking about, everything kind of behind the conversation, and everything that a lot of people put into it.
It's funny. That's the fourth time since we started talking that you separate yourself from the we. And it must be one of the tricks that you probably never anticipated calling the show Ramy is that you are the literal name and the literal
Sure,
face. So if people
sure.
talk about Ramy and you feel like you're getting too much credit and you're like, stop it with that. Like we
Or
all
or
did this together.
yeah, or the flip. Yeah.
Or yeah, or like, oh, no, you do not hate me. You hate all of us. I'm just kidding.
I mean,
But
you don't hate me, man. You hate yourself.
yeah, or that. But that's for Muslims doing things. The deeper part two with Ramy. Ramy, where can people find you? And what's next? Both.
I missed the first part of the question. It cut out for a second.
Let's start with the second part. What's next?
What's next? I'm we obviously are working on hopefully we get another season of Mo. Hopefully we get what I would hope would be the last season of Ramy. I'm working on these things under my production company Cairo Cowboy, which I'm hoping starts. We have a few other things in development that I'm trying to get going, and yeah, I really want to be part of helping other people tell their story, and also looking at storytelling from a more international perspective. And kind of, we have been really lucky to shoot overseas a lot. And I think looking at stories that come from the Middle East and Asia for me are exciting. And so I just have a big desire to figure out how to,
Mhm.
you know, connect with talent everywhere and figure out how to make it reality.
So here's an unplanned question, which we're going to squeeze in before the end of the time, because
Yeah.
people ask me a lot, about like I help people with their careers a lot,
Yeah.
and a lot of it's like overreach, reach out to people, like be clear on what you want, make sure you're saying the right thing. What's like the best cold outreach you've ever gotten that has actually led to somebody contributing their talent to the we that is your namesake Ramy?
So I don't use Twitter anymore, but the best one I got was on Twitter.
Hmm.
And I got a DM from somebody that was really kind and short and sweet and detailed. It was like specific. It was like a specific compliment about something, and there was like a very gentle ask of, "Let me know if you'd ever be down to read something." And but he sent me two messages, uh, a year and a half apart,
Hmm.
and they were both just like correct. It was just the right size. It wasn't too, I'm sure you have people reaching out to you all the time, and there's like, and I appreciate people's hunger and enthusiasm, but there is a level of kind of understanding the room, or where you are, or who you're talking to, or how you're moving. And anyway, so I just got this cold DM from somebody 2 years apart, or a year and a half apart, and I was like, wow, those were both like really, what's the worst that could happen? Like, sure, send me something, let me check it out. And yeah, and what he sent me was great. It was a really great script, and ended up putting him in our writers' room, and actually he was in the third season of the show. And so yeah, it worked out nice. I yeah, but it's a weird thing to say, because I've been trying to, um, in a lot of ways, by the way, I think the internet is a really positive thing. I think it's really connected us, and I think it's really kind of gorgeous and awesome. And so it's not to be judgmental of it, but I have kind of stepped back from looking at and reading and interacting on there, just because. And I think you get so busy, and then you start to think, okay, well, but I also want to hang out with my family, and I want to hang out with my friends. And so at a certain point, you kind of just can't be on it. And so I've definitely stepped back a lot from that. But yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate that answer and the honesty, because I think people don't realize, like, on the other side, like, yeah, you're hella cloudy, Ramy. You're like a you're hella cloudy now, you know? People love you, but there's a human on the other side that appreciates talent and honestly thrives off of talent. The we is a bunch of talented people that are scaling the ideas and adding to the ideas. And I think that's what's lost on people sometimes, is like people need really good teams.
Yes.
Um, but I got really practical. Sorry, I got to
It's a
do
great
for
question.
the audience. No,
Great
thank you.
question.
Thank you, Ramy. Where can people find you to
Find
follow
me.
your journey? Not literally. Don't give me your address, please. I'm not accountable for that.
Like what? I'm figuring out how I want to interact with the internet in a more meaningful way. But I think definitely, Instagram's the thing I like the most, just because I really like looking at the food recipe stuff that comes in my feed. Like, there's all those, reels of food, which I've then been told are really just TikTok. Like, I guess Instagram now
They're
is
TikToks.
recycled TikTok, which I like.
Yeah.
I like that I'm getting secondhand. It feels like
And
vintage
they're
TikTok.
like 3 months old, by the way. That's a joke. I'm more of a TikToker. We make
Yeah,
fun of you people because they're 3 months
yeah.
old.
I think it's vintage, so I like the vintage element, but I'm looking at food recipes on there and stuff. But yeah, I'm trying to post just stand up I'm doing and everything up there, and sharing stuff about the show. I mean, I think I yeah, between season 2 and 3, I probably didn't do much posting or anything for about a year and a half or something. But I think you know maybe I'll be using it a little bit more. But yeah, I'm there.
Well, we look forward to it. I look forward to it. I'll speak on behalf of me. I appreciate your voice. I love what you're doing, and I appreciate you so much for coming and telling us what you've done, sharing your journey with me a little bit. I'm sure you're slammed. By the way, guys, the season came out last week, and if you haven't binged it on Hulu, like, start now, literally now. Thank you, Ramy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was so great, and I really appreciate like your questions, and kind of how you're curating the podcast, and just the conversations you start. So it's really cool. It's very impressive. Thank you, and thanks for letting me be part of it.
Oh, thanks, Ramy.
Yeah.